Hello, IAMCR. My name is Susan Jacobson, and I'm an assistant professor in the School of Journalism at Florida International University in Miami. I'm sorry I could not be in Montreal today, but I'm going to give my presentation via video. The name of my presentation is It Takes a Village to Build a Sea Level Rise App, Civic Hacking as an Approach to Informing Citizens About Sea Level Rise in Miami. I worked on this project with my colleagues Juliet Pinto, Robert Gutsche, Kate McMillan, Jennifer Fu, and a cast of dozens of scientists, citizens, civic hacktivists, students, all here in Miami.
So the first thing you should probably understand about me is that I'm not a scientist. I'm a journalism professor, I'm a social scientist, but I'm not a marine or environmental scientist. When I moved to Miami in the fall of 2013, I had never directly experienced the effects of climate change. I parked my car in my new apartment building, it started to rain, I went upstairs, and I came downstairs later, and my car was sitting in half a foot of water. And this kept happening during the fall. So I asked my colleagues, Juliet Pinto and Kate McMillan, the producers of the award-winning South Florida Rising Seas documentary, what might be happening. And they said, well, it's a combination of the rain, high groundwater where you live, low elevation where you live, a sewer and drainage system that is exhausted and was never made to manage the amount of water it has now, and sea level rise, which helps to raise the groundwater in your area, especially during a period of high tide. My first thought when I came into contact with the flooding in my parking lot is I wanted to develop a tool that would help me determine when I would need to move my car. So my colleagues and I at FIU, we applied for the O&A Journalism Challenge grant. It was a very small grant. It was about $35,000, and we were one of 12 schools to whom this was awarded. What we did with the money is we used it to integrate sea level rise journalism activities into our curriculum. We did three main projects. One was we had a big media event on King Tide Day. King Tide, for those of you who may not be familiar, is the day of the year or the time of the year when the high tides are at their highest. And when the high tides are at their highest, flooding is more likely to occur. And if you live in Miami Beach, the roads can be flooded even though there's no rain. And this is in part due to sea level rise. So we had this big event for King Tide Day, and we were very lucky. Senator Bill Nelson from Florida and Senator Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island attended our event, as did the EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy. We also let our students produce a documentary on sea level rise that was aired on our local public television station. So the thing I'm going to talk about today is the Sea Level Rise Toolbox. I was the project manager on this app, and we're just going to go take a look at it right now. So this is the initial implementation of our Sea Level Rise Toolbox, which you can find at eyesontherise.org/app. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to enter an address in South Florida. So I'm going to enter an address on Miami Beach, 1204 Alton Road, which if you've been here to Miami Beach, you know that this is the Whole Foods. So here we are on Alton Road, and it says our elevation is 2.32 feet. And if we click on the tab that says Sea Level Rise, we can now take this little slider and just see what happens to the Whole Foods as sea level rise increases. Oh my. Oh dear. Oh my goodness. Well, it looks like nobody's going to be shopping at the Whole Foods when sea level rise reaches 6 feet. So we had a few goals in building our Sea Level Rise toolbox. First of all, we wanted to focus on South Florida. We wanted to create a tool that could inform citizens of the potential risk of sea level rise on their homes and businesses. Something that we found out early on is that most average citizens in South Florida are not aware of sea level rise and that it may pose a threat to them now or in the future. We also wanted to make it easy for a general news audience to use, and that was very important to us. There are a bunch of what's called interactive sea level rise viewers out there. Climate Central has a really wonderful one where you can zoom in on your region. You can change the level of sea level rise like you can in our presentation. You can also lay over census data like where is the, what are the economics of the area. For a general audience, that's a little bit overkill. It's a little bit too much information. So we wanted to make it extremely easy to use. So we created the tabbed interface with the help of Fusion, a media organization that has a big office down here in Miami. They're sort of a millennial news organization. They have a cable channel, they have a website, and they created the tabbed interface. The tabbed interface may not be the most sophisticated user interface in the world, but it has a very clear call to action action, and that's exactly what we were looking for. In our next phase, we're going to create a database of flood reports. Citizens can understand when and where flooding occurs. Flooding is the number one symptom of sea level rise. And one of the things that we found here in South Florida is that the flood reports are dispersed among many agencies, among different municipalities. The county has some, the South Florida Water Management District has some. It's dispersed. So we wanted to try to centralize that. And we wanted to create a way for citizens to add their own flood reports into a crowdsourced database of flood reports. We thought that this was important because flooding is often underreported. To pull this off, we worked with a large number of local organizations. We pulled in our students, we pulled in citizens, basically anyone that we could get that we thought could help us scientifically, from a citizen's perspective, from a student perspective, from a design perspective, help us to put the app together. Some of the most important media partners are listed here. WPBT2, the public TV station, Changing Seas, which is one of their locally produced programs, Fusion. Also, we worked closely with the GIS Center at FIU. They did the back-end development of the application and developed the algorithm for the visualization. The Clio Institute, which is a organization devoted to education about sea level rise and the environment, the South Florida Water Management District, and then two local technology hacktivist organizations, Code for Miami and Hacks Hackers. Code for Miami is the local brigade of Code for America, and what they do is they work with civic organizations to make data more accessible to the public. And Hacks Hackers is an international organization that brings journalists and technologists together to work with data and create new applications for the news. We reached out to all these organizations to help brainstorm ideas for the application, to identify data sources, to create prototypes, to test the prototypes before we finally launched it. There were several challenges that we faced, started with the fact that sea level rise is a political issue, even in a place like Miami, which is directly impacted by it, where Miami Beach is a very progressive municipality that is sort of tackling the issue of sea level rise head on. They have decided to install pumps on the streets of Miami Beach to help pump off some of the seawater that comes up through the sewer system, especially during the high tides. Initially, we were asked to launch this application at the Miami Beach Centennial, the 100th birthday celebration of Miami Beach, until the mayor saw our application and thought that it was just too alarming to be featured at the celebration. So we changed our launch to Bar Camp Miami, which is a big technology event. But we continue to have a really excellent relationship with Miami Beach going forward. One of the issues we faced early on was representing years versus feet. Right now, the app shows what happens to different locations with different feet of sea level rise. Initially, we wanted to use years, like what would happen in 2020, 2030, 2040, 2050. But because there are multiple models out there that show what might happen at different years, they're not consistent. And we were afraid that people who want to minimize the impact of sea level rise would be able to criticize us for using years when there was not one standard picture of what was going to happen when. So we cut that out early on. We also created this interface for a lay audience. In doing so, we made it very easy to use for the average citizen of Miami. But we abstracted and left out some of the more detailed scientific information. It was a bit of a trade-off. We just wanted to make it very easy to use for citizens whom we felt were not fully aware that sea level rise was an issue for Miami. And to this end, we got a little bit of criticism from some scientists who looked at our application and figured out that we were using Google Elevation, which is a layer that you can use on Google Maps, to inform people what their elevation is. So when you go to the app and you type in, "this is my address," and it comes back and it says, "your elevation is 2.32 feet," that point of data is coming from Google Elevation. And then when we do the visualization where you see the blue water coming up over your house, we're actually using LiDAR data, which is a much more precise measurement. And so the scientists felt that Google Elevation and LiDAR were like apples and oranges. Our perspective was that to a lay audience, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't make a difference. It's not going to impact the way they view or consume the information or what they think of it. So sort of what we did as a compromise was we tried to be as transparent as we could about our data sources. And in our application, there's a little blue eye circle. If you click on it, you will get extended description of how we put this together and what sources we used. Okay, just to wrap up, I'm going to talk very briefly about some of the things that we're doing next, and I'm going to focus on the flood report database that we're putting together. Working with Code for Miami, the Miami-Dade County government decided to adopt an open 311 system. 311 is the phone number that you call in the U.S. for governmental information or to report something going wrong in your neighborhood that's not related to crime or emergency. So for example, if there's a stoplight out, if there's a pothole, or if there's a flood. So there were flood reports in the 311 data set, and with the help of Code for Miami, we now have access to the flood reports that are reported to the county. And we have incorporated that already into our application. We haven't released it to the public yet because we are trying to get other sources of flood report information so that we can have a more comprehensive database of flood reports. We're also working on developing a citizen flood report tool, so if you see flooding in your neighborhood, like I do with my parking lot, you can record when and where it happened, you can describe it, you can upload a photo. We also would like to develop a curriculum for K through 12 to teach students how to identify flooding and how to identify the causes of flooding. So thank you so much for your time and attention. Please do not hesitate to contact me if you would like more information. I'm happy to reach out to everybody.